Hi, my name is Karis Butler, and I, along with Brian and Tanya and Riley, are going to give a presentation about the Virginia Tech shooting from April of 2007 and talk about the dilemma that ensued because of this crisis and how the different decision makers responded based on these events. So first, I'm going to give an overview of what happened that morning of the shooting and kind of timeline the events, and then I'm going to talk about an overview of what the presentation will cover. So on the morning of April in 2007, a student at Virginia Tech, Cho Seung-hai, is a 23-year-old student, and he murdered two students outside of Johnston Hall before 7:15 a.m. And following this shooting, he went back to his dorm where he completed a video that he had already started that he then sent to NBC News in New York City around 9 a.m. So after he sent the video at the post office, he came back to campus and entered Norris Hall around 9:01 a.m. and he locked all of the doors with chains, and then he proceeded to shoot 175 rounds, which killed 30 students and staff in that building. When Cho heard the police entering the building, he then used one of his own guns to shoot himself and kill himself. So that's the timeline of events from Cho's perspective, or the student's perspective, but what went on during that time is what we're going to look at today in our presentation. From the time that the president of Virginia Tech found out about the first shooting of the two students at 7 a.m. and the decisions that ensued after that about whether to alert the students, how to proceed, how the police got involved, etc. So first I want to show a video that was by the Associated Press shortly after the event that details the dilemmas that ensued that we are going to talk about in this presentation. Okay, now I'm going to talk about a preview of the points that we're going to cover in this presentation. First, I'm going to address the key components that are essential to good leadership and how they were handled throughout this dilemma. Next, Brian is going to talk about the origins of the dilemma, as well as key decision makers that were part of this decision-making process and their motivations behind their decisions. Next, Tanya is going to address the notable dysfunctions based on Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team and how those were each played out through the decision-making process. She will also address the positive and negative outcomes of these decisions. And finally, Riley will talk about hypotheses of different outcomes that could have happened based on the decisions that were made, as well as conclude the presentation. So first, to address some key components. The first one I want to address is that leaders sometimes make decisions without consulting others. So we've talked in this class a lot about the importance of leaders consulting other people and utilizing their resources and the people around them when making big decisions. And we see this not played out well in this example at Virginia Tech. The chief police, Wendell Flinchum, said that a campus-wide lockdown after the first shootings would have been impractical and probably ineffective. And this is one perspective on this, but it probably would have helped if he had gotten a lot of consultation and advice based on this. And looking back, he may admit that that was probably a wrong decision. He could not have anticipated that the other 30 students would be killed shortly after that, but that was his decision that he made as the chief of police. Another key decision maker is the Virginia Tech president, Stager, and in an article in the Huffington Post, it said that officials delayed sending the warning to other students to avoid panic on campus. And that's another issue that could be debated either side, but he made that decision not to send the text or the email message that could have potentially prevented the second shooting. Another key component is having a plan for crisis events. We talked a lot about in this class how good leaders can anticipate what could go wrong next in different situations, and this is a time when it really would have been effective to have a lot of anticipation for if this happens, what will we do? So in an article called Crisis Magnifies the Significance of Small Weaknesses, they said that over-response during the uncertain early aftermath is better than under-response. So maybe overreacting in a controlled way may have been a better response than holding back to say maybe we shouldn't alert people just yet. The police actually had a lead on another student who was the boyfriend of the first girl that was shot at 7 a.m., and they were pursuing that lead. And once they figured out that that was not a correct lead, then they started to backtrack, and by then it was too late, and the second shooting started to occur. So over-response is often a better choice than under-response. Secondly, in the article, it emphasizes that writing down everything that happens is really essential. Research has shown that writing during crisis increases clarity and improves decision-making. There was a lot of disconnect from the Virginia Tech president on whether he made decisions or when decisions were made or who made what calls, and there were a lot of inconsistencies in that. So if someone had taken the time to write down the order of events and who made the decisions and when, that could have cleared up a lot of that ambiguity and saved a lot of lawsuits and heartache following the tragedy. Another key component is having clearly defined roles. Dyer et al. In their book say that each person completes a piece of the puzzle and understands how his or her piece is vital to helping the combined team effort to be successful. That's a lot of words to basically explain that each person should know what their role is on the team and be able to help make the team successful by completing that one part of their team. So understanding that that is your role is a key component in a crisis event like this. If you aren't sure what your role is, there's not going to be enough time to sit down and say, what should my role be in this in the middle of a crisis? It said that a state panel that investigated the shooting concluded that officials erred in not sending an alert earlier. So if they knew this is the protocol for this kind of event, that could have saved the 30 students that were shot in the second shooting. But hindsight is 20/20, so that's not certain. A final component is politics and ego. In Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, he says that politics are the result of everyone being far too ambiguous about what we're all trying to accomplish. So the ambiguity is a key point in this, and with the politics in the leadership roles at Virginia Tech, it says that crisis manager Karen Doyne believed Tech president did not owe parents an apology for his actions on April 16th because an apology would imply errors on his part. So this is just a great example of how ego gets involved, and Karen said that she didn't want to admit that she was wrong. Tech president shouldn't have admitted it because he would look like he made a mistake, but that's just trying to preserve their own save face in this lawsuit that ensued from two of the parents of the victims. When they were confronted, they said, this is not our fault, we didn't do anything wrong, and that's just a great example of how ego can get in the way of successful teams. So next, Brian's going to talk about the origins of the dilemma as well as some of the key decision makers and how that played out in this dilemma.